Today we're going to look at how to stop cancel culture. Fasten your seatbelts. We have a lot to cover. Welcome to Culture Shift, the Barry Farah Show. We are living in an American culture that has shifted from tolerant to cancel culture, from decent to rude, from optimistic to cynical, and from relatively safe to increasingly violent. But it's not too late. I hope to equip you with a historical framework applied to current events so you can lead and get America back on track for good. Hello again. Welcome back to the Barry Farah Show, Culture Shift. Last time, we looked at the defeat of political correctness that happened in the early 2000s. We learned how three academics and one very popular talk show host helped lead the way toward defeating what was called politically correct, or what I call dogmatic relativism. Today, we're going to discuss a much more dangerous and prolific problem, cancel culture. It's more dangerous because it's far more prolific. It's more prolific for a whole bunch of reasons. For example, it has a lower standard of sound thinking to start with, and it openly creates more victims. Though campus radicals did all kinds of things to attempt to eliminate classical Christianity and the idea of Western thought in the 80s and 90s, the surge of anti-Western thought in the 2000s has gone to a whole new level. The defeat of political correctness was just a superficial short-term victory. Bush got elected, conservatives went on with their lives and didn't really deal with the source of the problem on universities. Like the 1960s radicals, re-emerging in more senior roles on campus in the 90s, their students appear to have bided their time, resurfacing with a vengeance in the 10s and the 20s. The results have arguably been much worse. The radicals of the 60s were attempting to indoctrinate Gen Xers. Now they're in their 40s and late 50s, all the way up to the late 50s. And that generation was influenced toward political correctness, but as they entered their careers, they were able to see its shortcomings, and they maintained a fundamental belief in free speech. And Gen Xers are a smaller generation numerically than their boomer parents or their Yer and Zer kids. Cancel culture's different than the political correct movement. It's the rapid ability to limit someone or banish them or fire them or boycott them. Psychologically, it's sourced in the fundamental way sociologists claim that the majority of Gen Yers handle conflicts. Now, don't get offended with me because this is just a generality and this is from sociologists, and my kids aren't this way and you're probably not either. But on average, according to the sociologists, rather than allow for debate, they just cancel their opponent. And this worked so well on the college campus that it trained those young people on a simpler and a faster method to annex their competition. It's kind of funny because the huge amounts of acquisitions in the world of big tech have happened partly just to get rid of the competition. In some cases, they don't even use the stuff that they purchased. They so fear that confrontation. But for a comparison, let's get back to the idea here with cancel culture in general. I'd like for you to consider that cancel culture is similar to the religious elite that were against Galileo. Galileo is similar to the person who is pro-American ideas that are traditional and historic. And that really does compare to today's cancel culture guy versus the conservatives. So you look at what Galileo did. He did a ton. He invented the scientific method, but he was after truth. Now, the religious elite, similar to today's cancel culture folks, canceled him. They canceled him, and the political elite along with them canceled him because what he was bringing to the table was different and uncomfortable for them, and it really did kind of hurt their position. Never mind that what he promoted was just an honest evaluation, allowing truth to surface. Whatever the truth is, let it surface. And the sad truth is that today's cancel culture folks are just like the religious and political elite were during Galileo's time. America's universities aren't really devoted to free expression today. They're not even in pursuit of truth. Even though the facts of American history, for example, reveal that it is truly unlike any other superpower in history. There's no way around that. Professors teach that America didn't achieve that much. They teach that being founded on freedom principles, advancing the rights of equal treatment under the law, and repairing the damage that's done by the war of even our enemies is not exceptional. We're the only superpower that's ever done that. I mean, if we were like the other superpowers, we would have continued to go on in and demolish Russia and China back when we could have, and we would have been truly imperialistic, but we weren't that way. We were truly exceptional. No, today's campuses are dominated by speech codes, safe spaces, banned speakers, protests, and the only passive-aggressive response the leaders of these radical ideas will promulgate are cancellations. If a student is so sensitive that she can complain about microaggressions and being triggered, she learns a revised history of America, and she learns to self-segregate and to pursue safety over everything. Let me tell you something. Sometimes a little bit of risk is a great thing. Booker T. Washington High School had a little bit of risk when I was a kid, and I went there. Wonderful high school. 50% black, 50% white. Would it work? It worked famously. I had friends at every level, sports and study groups, and in my little Bible study group. I had friends that were black, friends that were white in every level. It was fantastic. And I learned to really not even see color. And I think most people there did too. So integration, that risk of just full out integration and just going to look at the character of the person and just see what happens if we can just promote success at every level and let everybody be treated equally. It was fantastic, absolutely wonderful. But the risk was that you had to allow for integration. People now just go after safety. As universities continue to crank out these graduates who hate Western civilization, our freedom's really at risk. I mean, even a pro-choice liberal and an atheist, Greg Lukianoff with his co-authors, say, look, microaggressions, entity politics, safetyism, call-out culture, and segregation and intersectionality, all those things are hindering, I'm quoting from them, our young people's social, emotional, and intellectual development. It's true. I mean, safetyism as a culture or a belief system is really including your emotional safety. And basically you're saying, look, that's the sacred value. Just make sure people are safe. So what happens is basically you can't make a difficult trade-off that's actually in truth what happens in the real world, because you can't find a place that's truly, totally safe, where there's not going to be any mark against you. Though movements don't normally have a single point of origin, this cancel culture does. It's an assault on our free speech. And it really can be traced to about 2014. It's that year that student activists were emboldened by a series of victories. They had successfully prevented mainstream speakers, the most notable being Condoleezza Rice, from coming to campus, a whole bunch of others. Now, for a little while, some of the conservatives and civil libertarians thought, this is just going to get left behind, and these impulses against free expression are going to evaporate as soon as these students graduate from college. I mean, that's what happened to us, they would say of themselves. So as soon as they get into the professional world, they'll be forced to dismiss this campus theory. It's unreasonable. It's not practical. You can't just cancel everybody. And just like us, they'll get rid of it, just like we got rid of political correctness. But unfortunately, that did not happen. They took their radical method for handling conflict into every aspect of society. Now think about this. You have a famous, capable, black female. She is articulate. Her views are mainstream conservative. There's nothing radical about her. She's an extraordinary academic. Condoleezza Rice was superb at every level. And she was very moderate in the way that she would articulate. She had a peaceable, measured, kind of intellectual approach to articulating things. She was not this radical rebel rouser. It's just that some of her thoughts, at least in my opinion, seem to be irrefutable, because she argued for Western thought and conservative policy. She was personally unimpeachable. Wouldn't you want to hear what she had to say if you're a young person on campus, even if you disagree with her? Don't you want to hear what she has to say? Well, you weren't allowed to from cancel culture. Instead of debating her, instead of letting her air what she believed to be true, instead of listening to her, instead of trying to increase their own personal wisdom and strengthen their soul, they just made sure she couldn't get her ideas across. I mean, she could dismantle 4 years of leftist education in about a 45-minute speech. So they canceled her. Those same cancel people are now in the corporations, in the media, in the entertainment industry, in sports, in big tech, and of course, still in schools. And I've got a term for them. They're the ascendant intolerant. The ascendant intolerant. They're making their way up. They're extremely successful, but they use this passive-aggressive strategy. What they'll do is they'll mount support to cancel someone for a conservative belief, and they'll pull it off against them. They'll make them into a single enemy and make it appear like they're all by themselves. They'll have dozens and hundreds against one. Examples abound. There's celebrities that have been fired for having said the wrong thing. There's an athlete who was suspended due to his wife's comments. I mean, no kidding. It's a soccer player. He didn't even make the comment himself, and he still got banished from his professional career. It's the tearing down of historical monuments. We don't want to even know that Christopher Columbus existed. Now, look, let's be honest. Only the naive, truly naive, didn't know about early American founders as people. They had foibles, they had frailty, they made mistakes, but the mature learner can still glean valuable insight and wisdom by learning what actually happened in history. In spite of their personal imperfections, America's early leaders still fought for freedom. They still fought for honor. A stable thinker can vote for someone who has the right policies, even if he is personally someone who has antics you don't agree with or other shortcomings. Yet, the leftist of today does not want to honestly discuss the policy position at all. They just support tearing down the monument. They'll just take that children's book out of publication. I mean, instead of talking about it, they'll just take it out of publication because it's got an illustration of a Chinese person running with chopsticks in his hand. Never mind that 99% of all Chinese people would be able to look at that, and they're probably strong enough to handle it. They look at that and they see it as an illustration, and they can put it in context. But cancel culture is how you annex a person with a traditional belief. It's how a logical and articulate young person who believes in classical Christianity just gets removed from the public square. This actually happened. So here's what happened. A conservative Christian built a platform for herself in the public square and through this implied in fact contract. An implied in fact contract is there's certain things that are implied in that agreement that you maybe don't write down but that are happening. And that contract was broken. And this is where the conservative was relying upon certain representations by YouTube and some of these other big tech utilities to get her message out. But they unreasonably canceled her just due to her beliefs. Now why did the big tech Gen Yers cancel her? They couldn't handle her argument. She's also a Gen Yer. She's black. She's conservative. And they can't handle how articulate she is, how compelling she is. They don't have the faculty in their own soul to debate her. So they cancel her. This is so against the American idea. I mean, the American idea is so much more robust. There's so much more rigor to it. It was to allow for a person with belief. He's free to not only have an entrenched belief, but he can express it. He can express it with passion and endeavor to win others to win his way of seeing things. But cancel culture doesn't have that ability. It's too frail. Cancel culture is cowardly because it basically has no tolerance for learning from someone who has a conservative belief system. Cancel culture simply wants that young, very talented woman silenced. Cancel culture is effective, though, because it's expanded to every major arena. Like the politically correct movement, it did impose linguistic strictures and thought limitations on the English department, but it's way beyond that. Cancel culture is the method that's used now to dismantle any wrong point of view. It's how leftists handle conflict. I've mentioned social scientists tell us that on average, millennials abhor rigorous debate. Now again, I'm not saying this is you and it's not my kids, but they abhor rigorous debate, especially on topics of conservative versus liberal policies. They literally fear the confrontation. Millennials are now in their 30s and their early 40s. These graduates are in the legal, the PR, and the HR departments of all these major corporations, and it's really impressive how influential they've become. They impact the board and the associations that the board members attend. A point of reference is the National Association of Corporate Directors. That's something I'm a member of. It's NACD. It's one of those preeminent associations. They have 20,000 members from around the world. They've got board members that serve mostly publicly traded companies. These are paid board members. They steer the most influential and largest companies in the world. I'll probably get canceled for mentioning this, but what happened a few years ago is the NACD allowed millennials to kind of get in charge of the future of the agenda. And in a very few short years, instead of just going after how to do the best things in business and making sure you're legally compliant and all of the complicated things that a multinational company would have to be involved in and what boards should be involved in, the NACD is now just basically saying, I want you to be outspoken about being outspoken. And it has to be on behalf of BLM, ESG, systemic racism, and imposing racial and gender diversity quotas. And you got to do that in the boardroom and at every department in business. Now, I'm not talking about having diversity among genuinely qualified people for a role. I'm just talking about diversity regardless of the qualification. And this is just one example of hundreds, from the Chamber of Commerce to business associations. And as a result of this type of a corporate influence, things have changed. I mean, it used to be that you would just run your company and you've got the goal of improving shareholder value and creating a great culture to pull that off. Now you got to be involved in politics, and a quota is required. I'll give you an example. Just recently, the CEO of United just announced a quota-based hiring of pilots. I mean, as a pilot, I'm telling you that is a job for those who are naturally inclined to it and they're skilled at it. There should be no other criteria. Yet they have decided to exclude qualified people of one race and gender to the benefit of another, even if they're not the most qualified for the job. So the American corporation, the entity that we could usually rely on historically to be pro-freedom economics, or at least pro-capitalism, at least some rendition of it, and they used to be a bastion of just getting business done with some form of excellence, well, that's now required they've got to weigh in on political issues. And these political issues that they have to weigh on have to be Marxist. I mean, they come right out of those playbooks. Cancel culture impacts the editorial desks of nearly every mainstream media company. I mean, even in the Wall Street Journal, which used to be a little bit more conservative, they've dialed down their historically freedom-oriented slant. Cancel culture is at the highest level in sports organizations. Cancel culture is comfortably settled into all the major Hollywood studios. It always has been. It's hard to imagine how they could become even more leftist, but they are even more leftist than they used to be. In the 90s, there was this conservative student who could escape political correctness by just avoiding the ethnic studies course on college campus. But in the 2020s, you can't. Cancel culture is pretty much everywhere. Systemic racism must be taught, and you must at least feign agreement in your study groups, or you will be punished and probably canceled. Back in the 90s, free speech was understood to be important. Most people, right or left or center, agreed that you shouldn't limit anyone's right to free speech. God gave it to us. We should certainly give it to each other. Now there's this disturbing change. An increasing number of people under the age of 40 do not believe in freedom of speech or freedom of expression as standalone values. They only believe in those beliefs connected to one of their other values. In other words, you can only have freedom of speech if you agree with them on some leftist idea. And this trend came from a hypersensitivity on campus. All you had to do is claim that the language a person was using made you feel unsafe. If he said that delayed gratification is a good thing and you didn't understand delayed gratification growing up, then you could just go to the thought police on campus and they would come to the rescue and punish that conservative who was speaking his mind. And big tech and big business in general, they're supportive of this cancel culture. They're fine with this anti-freedom approach. I mean, they've got more customers in China than they do here, and so they're fine. They want the passionate, convincing believers in conservative principles and Western thought to be silenced, or at least muted. You know, Supreme Court Justice Thomas just recently insinuated that the problem needs to be addressed directly. I mean, he said that, look, since today's digital platforms provide all these avenues for historically unprecedented amounts of speech, including speech by government actors, that concentrated control of so much speech in the hands of a few private parties has just got to be addressed. The First Amendment's more than just a legal provision. It embodies the most important value of American democracy: repression of political speech by large corporations with market power is fundamentally un-American. Those leftists who don't think this is a big deal should consider recent events from just another point of view. What if, now think about this, let's just say you're a leftist, and I just want you to be honest. What if in the closing weeks of a presidential election, your candidate, Joe Biden, was blocked by Comcast, and they blocked his access to everything, and his access to the New York Times was blocked, and his access to CNN was blocked? Now, that actually happened. It just was to Joe Biden's opponent in 2020. What if AT&T erased Joe Biden from its networks? Not just his own account, but even the third-party publication of his voice, while allowing human traffickers to use its networks to solicit the smuggling of children. That happened too, just with a different politician. So how do we stop cancel culture? I believe we need at least a dozen concurrent initiatives I mean, some are going to take a few years to implement, but what I'm going to do is just splatter these out there, and I'm hoping they'll get into your fertile mind and that you'll come up with some ideas and creative thoughts to be able to take from these and actually work them. I think if we did that in a concentrated effort over the next few years, things could actually change in a beneficial way, and we could recapture free speech. Number one, you've got to support all the academics who make the case for freedom. Take their books and expand their reach through your social network and let everybody know about them. Number two, we've got to get some center-left politicians to make the case against cancel culture. Some of them have been canceled. Let's get them on the bandwagon. Number three, support well-done freedom-oriented media and entertainment. Anything that's out there that's been well done, that's freedom-oriented, that's wholesome, get rid of the junk. Don't watch it. Just quit. Help disseminate the anti-cancel culture sentiment. Like, for example, you got Babylon Bee, which is an example. They attack it with humor. Increase their network by subscribing and help other people that are like them have more influence. Just do what you can to develop and distribute that. And those movies that are making fun of cancel culture or starting to, support them, get behind them, and distribute them broadly. Just reveal how fragile that person's mind is who really can't handle a robust argument and who usually denies what's actually true. We should, number four, make it a badge of honor to be anti-cancel culture. The more people that stand up and are anti-cancel culture, the more people that will. Because you've got a lot of people that agree with you. You just need to stand up. Follow and share conservative pundits and organizations that are already creating thoughtful anti-cancel culture content, and broaden that and make sure that's part of everything you do. Go to all the media that allow for that, the alternatives to the big tech guys that are becoming big tech, and get on their networks. Number five, pressure various publications to return to their roots. And here's what I mean. An example would be the Wall Street Journal. They claimed back in the late 1990s that political correctness was wrong and it needed to be defeated. And they claimed it needed to be defeated on campus and in the press. And they said that it was necessary to define and defend the fundamental Western values of free inquiry and free speech. They might need a fresh reminder that freedom of speech is still at stake. So number five, let's get the folks that used to be for freedom of speech and let's bring them back. Let's show them that we've got some power and influence as well. Number six, you are a Y'er or a Zer. You're somewhere between if you're out of college all the way through your early 40s. That's you. Get positions of power. Get into the HR department and the legal department and the PR department of corporations and change the argument. Look, let's return to just succeeding in business and let's just think about the customer and give the customer a great experience, and let's be against political interference. Remind them, they're just companies. We did not vote for the company. We voted for legislatures. We voted for others, not them. They need to stay out of politics. Number seven, get into positions of power in sports and the media. Expose the intellectually frail argument of cancel culture. It's ridiculous. I mean, there has not been a culture that has done a better job of taking care of a minority group than the sports culture in this country. Remind them that people want to watch sports or an action-adventure movie without a leftist bias. Sports and entertainment media are supposed to be wholesome, and they're supposed to be a break from politics. That's number seven. Number eight, get into positions of power in technology and schools. Compare and contrast cancel culture people with the elite in Galileo's time. And compare Galileo to the conservative who wants to make the case based on logic. Let's make it a little embarrassing to be cancel culture oriented. We're not flat earth people. We believe in science. We actually look at what's true inductively. Number nine, saturate the market with the obvious. Freedom of speech should not be an issue. Everyone on every side should agree with free expression. It's part of your humanity. Increase the pressure until cancel culture is universally reviled. Stay with it. Supersaturate. Cancel culture. The 3 C's. That's not a bad one. Somebody take that and run with it. C cubed. Cancel culture. Number 10, get coordinated. Get names of people who are pro-cancel culture. Get their personal information. Be poised with an army of your own to treat them with the same direct criticism they dish out. They're bullies. Bullies don't respond to rational conversation. They stop being bullies when they experience the same that they are dishing out. Go after the person or persons who initiated the cancel culture action against you and get a large team of support. Let's turn the table a little bit and let's be able to respond in kind. Number 11, support some organizations that are on campus that have a conservative voice. The loudest of these voices is TPUSA. They are phenomenal. They're a powerful force for good. Support them. Volunteer. Help them out on college campuses. And finally, number 12, vote freedom at every level. Don't vote emotionally. Listen to the policies, and the policies that are closest to freedom, vote that way, all the way up to president. The problem with many is they just don't understand freedom principles. So demand articulate freedom rights first, and then the policies that are undergirded by those freedom rights. That's what we're looking for. Policy should always be formulated in submission to and in the context of freedom rights. And finally, be encouraged. It's not really a point. That's just the point of the point. Be encouraged, even in the face of the tyranny of cancel culture. The majority of all the tweets are sent out by roughly 10% of the people on Twitter. You know that? It seems like this big, huge force, but 10% of the people send out the majority of all the tweets on Twitter. They're just organized bullies. But in reality, we're really not outnumbered. We just need to be more thoughtful and coordinated and consistent in pushing back. Stay hopeful, because you own God-given rights, and they are obvious rights because they connect with every soul. We want to be free to express and to believe and to express what we believe. Stand strong. Build for the long term. Your success depends on your freedom. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Hi, I'm David Farah. Thank you for listening to my dad's podcast, The Barry Farah Show, Culture Shift. Click subscribe now to be sure you don't miss an episode. Share this podcast with your friends on social media and give The Barry Farah Show your 5-star rating. Check out today's show notes below this episode and at thebarryfarahshow.com. This podcast is also available in video format at The Barry Farah Show on YouTube. See you next time.